Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm your host, and I'm thrilled you're joining us today.
And I'm your expert. We have a really incredible of how human beings handle a crisis.
Yeah, we're unpacking a fascinating debate in the aviation world today. But first, just picture this for a second. Imagine you are flying a small plane.
Sorry.
The skies are, this brilliant blue, the engine is humming along perfectly, and you feel completely in control.
Sounds like a great day to fly.
Right, but then suddenly you accidentally fly right into a dense gray cloud. You can no longer see the horizon.
The world outside the window just becomes this blank wall of white.
Exactly. It's totally disorienting. And according to aviation data, if you haven't been specifically trained for that exact moment, you have exactly 178 seconds before you completely lose control of that aircraft.
Man, 178 seconds, that's less than 3 minutes to live.
It's terrifying. So our mission today is to figure out why this happens and, honestly, more importantly, how we can train the human brain to actually survive it.
Yeah, it's the ultimate test of human psychology under extreme, sudden stress. We're looking at this insightful article today titled The Training Gap: Why General Aviation Needs Simulator Crisis Rehearsal.
Right. And the hook here is just fascinating. You have general aviation, which is basically your everyday private pilots flying small single-engine planes. And then you have professional aviation, meaning airline captains, corporate jet pilots. Both of these groups use flight simulators, but they use them in radically different ways.
Radically different. And that difference literally saves lives.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay.
Because if you spend any time browsing pilot forums, you will inevitably see this endless, heated debate. People are constantly arguing over whether playing Microsoft Flight Simulator at home, plus, a little real flight time, can actually replace a formal flight school.
Oh yeah, it's a constant argument online.
But according to our source material, arguing about simulators versus real airplanes is entirely the wrong question to be asking. So why is that debate completely missing the point?
Well, it misses the point because the professional aviation world answered that question decades ago, and they just moved on. I mean, professional pilots, they do not use simulators to replace real flying.
Right.
They use them alongside real flying for their mandatory recurrent training, and their safety records are staggeringly good as a result.
So what's happening with the private pilots?
The problem we see in general aviation is this lingering mindset that a simulator is just like an optional toy, or maybe a supplement for a brand new student, rather than the core environment for building safety and survival skills.
Which is strange, right? Because modern simulators are undeniably incredible for teaching the basics. The source material points out that the FAA actually formally recognized this back in 2016.
Yeah, they're fantastic for teaching instrument scanning, navigation, standard operating procedures.
Right, and research from the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, AOPA, and Redbird Flight Simulations shows that students who have simulator exposure actually advance through their training way faster.
They absolutely advance faster. Just think about the environment for a second. In a simulator, you can pause the flight.
Oh, true. You can't pause a real plane.
Right. You can ask your instructor questions without screaming over engine noise. You don't have to worry about sudden bad weather. And, you aren't burning super expensive aviation fuel.
It's just a totally optimized learning environment.
Exactly. You figure out how to program those modern digital screens, the glass cockpits on the ground. Then you get into the real airplane, basically just to demonstrate what you've already internalized. The transfer of those basic skills is universally accepted.
It makes total sense. For you listening, it's kind of like learning how to drive. Practicing routines in a simulator is like learning the pedals in an empty parking lot.
That's a great analogy.
And then the real airplane is like driving in highway traffic. But I have to ask, if everyone agrees that simulators work so well for the basics, why is there a debate at all?
What's fascinating here is that routine flying, straight and level on a sunny day, is actually the easy part of aviation. Yeah. The debate exists because general aviation hasn't fully embraced the simulator's true superpower, rehearsing the catastrophic, highly improbable events.
So the terrifying situations that almost never happen but are completely lethal when they do.
Precisely. The exact scenarios that kill pilots. The situations you simply cannot practice in a real airplane.
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly a little chilling. According to the McSpadden report from the AOPA Air Safety Institute, roughly 70% of non-commercial fixed-wing accidents are pilot-related.
Yeah.
And the leading factor across the board is loss of control in flight. Now, there's good news in the data.
Right, the 2024 numbers.
Exactly. In 2024, general aviation achieved the lowest fatal accident rate since tracking began in 2009. We're talking roughly 165 fatal accidents per 100,000 flight hours.
The long-term trend is very positive. Airplanes today are incredibly reliable machines.
But when we look at the lethal accidents that do happen, they're super specific. Engine failures the second the wheels leave the runway.
Severe icing on the wings.
Violent wind shear. Or losing your electrical systems while flying blind inside a cloud. Which brings us back to that terrifying metric we started with. The industry calls it VFR into IMC.
Visual flight rules into instrument meteorological conditions.
Meaning a pilot who is legally only supposed to fly by looking out the window at the horizon accidentally flies into a cloud where visibility drops to 0.
And that mistake is incredibly deadly.
The source notes it has an 86% fatality rate. Let that sink in. 86%.
It's massive.
And shockingly, roughly 1/3 of these accidents involve pilots who actually hold an instrument rating, meaning they are legally certified to fly in clouds.
Yeah, that part always surprises people.
But the statistic that truly stopped me in my tracks was the non-instrument rated pilots. Like we said at the start, when they blunder into a cloud, they lose control of the aircraft in just 178 seconds.
It's so fast.
Less than the length of a pop song. And flying in instrument conditions generally makes a fatal outcome 14 times more likely.
It sounds impossibly fast until you understand the physiological mechanism at play here.
All right, break that down for us.
So your brain, your inner ear, your spatial perception, they rely almost entirely on visual references to the horizon to know which way is up.
Okay.
Inside your inner ear, you have these semicircular canals filled with fluid. When you bank an airplane into a turn, that fluid moves, and tiny hairs sense that movement, telling your brain, hey, we are turning.
Makes sense.
But if you stay in that turn for just a few seconds, the fluid catches up and settles down, your ear stops sending the turning signal.
Oh, wow.
Suddenly, your brain physically feels like you're flying perfectly straight and level, even though the airplane is banked over in a descending spiral.
So the pilot physically feels like they are flying straight, but they look at their instruments and the instruments say they're spiraling downward.
Exactly.
Mm.
And because that physical sensation is so overpowering, they trust their lying inner ear instead of the instruments on the dashboard. They pull back on the controls to try and climb, which just tightens the spiral and the plane plummets.
That's terrifying.
Spatial disorientation happens incredibly fast, and it is overwhelmingly powerful.
But wait, hold on. I have to interject here because I'm sure anyone listening is wondering the same thing.
Sure, what is it?
If a flight instructor has dual controls, right, and they're sitting right next to the student in the plane, why can't they just take the plane up to like 10,000 feet and safely simulate these things? Why can't you just simulate a vacuum failure or wind shear way up in the sky where you have plenty of time to recover?
Well, because the cost of practicing a genuine crisis in a real aircraft is often the crisis itself.
What do you mean?
You just cannot safely practice these things in the air. Consider wind shear, for example. No instructor can safely induce a microburst, which is a chaotic, violent downdraft of air that can literally swat a plane out of the sky.
Right, you can't just order up a storm.
Exactly. You can't deliberately fly into severe airframe icing just to see how the plane handles. And think about the takeoff scenario we mentioned.
The engine failure.
Yeah, no sane flight examiner is going to reach over and literally turn the engine off right after you lift off the runway, directly over a populated suburban neighborhood.
Oh, yeah, because if the student panics or the engine hesitates to restart, you're suddenly flying a 2,000-pound unpowered glider over a subdivision.
Exactly the problem. Real airplanes are fantastic for practicing success, but they are terrible, highly dangerous places to practice catastrophic failure.
So simulators are really the only option.
Simulators are the only environment on Earth where you can safely practice a total cascading failure, watch the situation spiral completely out of control, crash, and then survive to talk about it over coffee.
Okay, so if they have the physical skills to recover in theory, and the real-world stakes are literally life and death, what is physically happening in their brains, that overrides that training when the real emergency happens, why do perfectly trained pilots suddenly forget everything?
It all comes down to cognitive science. The FAA actually studied this extensively through a program called FITS Industry Training Standards.
Okay.
They looked at fatal accidents in advanced, highly capable aircraft. What they found was that the root cause wasn't a lack of stick and rudder physical flying skill. The planes didn't crash because the pilots forgot how to move the yoke.
So why did they crash?
They crash because of poor decision-making. They crash because of a total loss of situational awareness.
The brain failed before the hands and feet did.
Consistently. There was a landmark motion simulator study published in 2017 that illustrates this perfectly. Researchers took a group of highly trained airline pilots and sprang an unexpected aerodynamic stall on them.
Now, wait, these are professional pilots, right?
Yes. And these pilots had practiced stall recoveries perfectly over and over again to maintain their certifications. But when the stall was a total, unannounced surprise.
What?
78% of them made errors executing the recovery procedure. 78%. A procedure they knew flawlessly, they totally fumbled just because they were startled.
That is wild.
Right. If we look at the broader implications of that study, it reveals a massive flaw in how we historically approach any kind of training. Additional studies in 2018 and 2024 show that highly standardized, highly predictable training creates what researchers call brittle skills.
Brittle skills. I think everyone listening can relate to that concept in some area of their life, honestly, like passing a test perfectly on paper but completely freezing up when you have to do it in the messy real world.
Exactly. It means your skills just shatter the moment they're forced to transfer to a genuinely novel, unexpected emergency. Researchers like Landman and his colleagues describe this phenomenon using the concept of mental frames.
Mental frames.
Yeah, a mental frame is basically a knowledge structure built from your prior experiences.
I picture this kind of like a massive filing cabinet inside the brain.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. If a pilot has never seen a specific chaotic crisis unfold before, they do not have a file folder for it.
Ah, I see.
So when the surprise hits, the brain yanks open the drawer labeled "Engine on Fire at Night," finds it completely empty, and just panics.
Wow.
The event doesn't fit any existing structure. Working memory dumps, adrenaline spikes, and their cognitive processing essentially freezes.
It's like practicing a fire drill at your office.
Yeah.
If you only ever practice the fire drill when it's scheduled on a sunny Tuesday afternoon and everyone casually walks down the well-lit stairs carrying their coffee, your brain still might completely freeze when the alarm goes off randomly on a chaotic Friday. Half the lights are out and you smell actual smoke.
Exactly.
You have a file folder for Sunny Tuesday drill, but you definitely don't have a folder for Friday chaos. So are we saying perfect practice doesn't actually make perfect?
Well, perfect practice of a predictable routine does very little to prepare you for the unpredictable. You have to train the brain to manage the surprise itself.
How do you even do that?
The European Union Aviation Safety Agency, EASA, has heavily researched this specific issue. They ran multi-year experiments focusing on the startle effect, using massive Boeing 737 and 737 simulators.
And what did they find?
They proved that recovering your composure mid-crisis, managing that massive spike of startle and surprise, is a distinct cognitive skill all on its own. It's not a procedural checklist you can memorize. It is a mental muscle that must be actively rehearsed.
Okay, so knowing that unpredictable crisis rehearsal is the absolute key to this cognitive resilience, how does a pilot actually get this training? Because my laptop sitting on my kitchen table feels very different from a multi-million-dollar airline motion rig. Does the type of simulator hardware matter?
The hardware absolutely matters, though you don't necessarily need a multi-million-dollar rig to get the benefit.
Yeah.
The FAA actually categorizes simulators on a fidelity ladder to determine exactly what kind of official training credit a pilot can log.
Let's climb that ladder. High entry level, the source mentions the BATD, or Basic Aviation Training Device.
Right.
These have generic cockpits, basic instruments, and are mostly just good for early procedural work, like figuring out how a GPS behaves. But the next step up is where it gets serious. The AATD, or Advanced Aviation Training Device.
The AATD is a massive leap in fidelity. These units mimic a specific model of aircraft. And here is the crucial regulatory requirement to get this certification from the FAA. The device must be able to simulate every single emergency procedure that carries a checklist in that real aircraft's flight manual.
So if the real airplane's manual has a procedure for, I don't know, an alternator failing at night in the freezing rain, the AATD has to be able to recreate that exact scenario.
Precisely. Above that, you have FTDs, flight training devices, which are full-size replicas of a specific flight deck. You often see these in major university aviation programs.
Okay.
And finally, at the very top, you have the FFS, the Full Flight Simulator. These feature full six-axis physical motion, hyper-realistic wraparound visuals, flawless systems realism. These are what the airlines use.
Right, for the big commercial jets. But no matter which tier of device you are using, there is a critical insight from our source material about why simulators are fundamentally better for learning emergencies.
Oh, definitely.
A 2023 industry analysis by Frasca, a company that builds a lot of these devices, highlighted this stark difference. In a real plane, if you're practicing an engine fire, you don't actually pull the fire extinguisher handle or shut off the fuel.
Right, you'd crash.
Yeah, you just touch the switch with your finger and pantomime the emergency with your instructor. You just talk through it. I would do this, I would do that.
It is entirely theoretical. You are just reciting a script.
But in a simulator, you can't just talk. You have to actually work the problem. You experience the physiological cues, the blaring alarms, the flashing warning lights, the changing aerodynamics as the plane loses thrust.
The stress is real.
And most importantly, you see the consequences of your decisions play out fully. If you make the wrong choice or you freeze, the simulator crashes into the ground.
And that crash is incredibly valuable because immediately after, the instructor freezes the scenario. You debrief on exactly what went wrong, you reset the software, and you try a different approach right then and there.
You start building that mental file folder.
Yes. Aviation insurers are deeply aware of how effective this is, too. Programs like Avemco's Safety Rewards are offering premium discounts, commonly around 10%, for pilots who simply complete annual recurrent simulator training.
The actuaries have done the math.
They absolutely have. They know that a pilot who has failed safely in a simulator is mathematically far less likely to fail fatally in the real air.
And the source points out that this isn't just for pilots who can afford expensive flight school devices. Even home users, people with a joystick and a copy of Microsoft Flight Simulator or X-Plane, can benefit immensely.
Absolutely.
But only if they use it right. If you just boot up the software, set the weather to clear skies, and fly comfortable routes from point A to point B, you aren't building any resilience.
Not at all.
You have to intentionally inject random failures into the software. Program the computer to kill the engine at a random, unannounced time. Set the weather to suddenly drop to zero visibility while you are trying to land.
You have to force your brain to deal with the unexpected.
So what does this all mean for the general aviation community? It means having a fancy $250,000 AATD simulator sitting in the lobby of your local flight school is entirely useless if the instructors only ever use it to practice sunny day takeoffs.
It's a waste of the technology.
The hardware matters, absolutely, but the homework, the specific terrifying scenarios you deliberately choose to run, matters significantly more.
I couldn't agree more, and this philosophy aligns perfectly with the National Transportation Safety Board. The NTSB recently issued Safety Alert SA-031, which strongly advocates for scenario-based training that directly mirrors the real-world factors causing fatal accidents.
Like the ones we discussed earlier.
Yet we are talking about rehearsing post-takeoff engine failures, inadvertent cloud encounters, stalled approaches. The entire goal of all of this, the simulators, the unpredictable scenarios, the startle effect training, is to build a massive mental library of failures.
So that when the real emergency happens, you aren't meeting it for the very first time. You already have the file folder.
Exactly. When the engine sputters over a forest or the windshield instantly fills with opaque ice, you don't experience that cognitive freeze. You don't dump your working memory into blind panic.
Right.
Instead, you feel a flicker of familiarity. Your brain says, wait, I have been through something very much like this before. I have a mental frame for this. And that tiny flicker of familiarity is what buys you the mental bandwidth to execute the recovery and save your own life.
That is just profound. To wrap up this deep dive, the takeaway from our sources is crystal clear. Simulators are not about replacing real flight time. They never were.
No, they play a totally different role.
They are the crucial, irreplaceable venue for building resilient, adaptive judgment. They're the only place a human being can safely build that mental library of frames for the absolute worst-case scenarios.
It's about closing the terrifying gap between being legally certified to operate a machine and being genuinely prepared to survive a crisis.
And for you listening right now, even if you never intend to set foot in a small airplane, this aviation mindset of preparing for the unexpected has massive value far beyond the cockpit.
Oh, completely.
Think about the cognitive science we just discussed. Brittle skills shatter during a surprise crisis. Perfect practice of a comfortable routine does not save you when that routine is violently broken.
It really doesn't.
So I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder on your own. If cognitive science shows that brittle skills shatter during a surprise aviation crisis, where else in your daily life, perhaps in your financial planning, your career trajectory, or even your personal relationships, are you relying on brittle routines? Are you avoiding the practice of failure simply because you've never given yourself a safe simulator to rehearse what happens when things go completely wrong?
That's a powerful question to ask yourself.
It really is. Think about it. We'll catch you next time.